The storm had followed her since morning. By the time Marian reached the outskirts of Hollow End, the clouds were boiling over the hills like smoke from a battlefield. Her rental car's tires stuttered through muddy gravel, and the road ahead narrowed into a winding path flanked by trees twisted like screaming mouths. She gripped the wheel tighter. The village came into view like a bruise pressed into the earth. Steep roofs, soot-stained stone, and a single looming church steeple that looked as though it had been stabbed into the ground by a violent god. Above it, the old belfry. Marian pulled over and stared. No sound. No movement. Not even the crows dared perch there. She stepped out. Rain began at once, sharp and cold. A low wind pushed at her coat, and with it came something else, the smell of scorched iron. She shivered. This place hadn't changed. Not in 23 years. Not since her sister vanished. The church hadn't been open to the public in decades. A faded sign read condemned. Structurally unsafe. But the door was unlocked. It yawned inward with a moan like a dying cello. Inside, the air was colder. Thicker. Marian stepped over the threshold and felt her stomach drop, as if she'd just crossed into something older than time. The pews were rotting. The stained glass was blackened from some long-ago fire. And high above, the bell tower stretched like a throat trying to forget how to scream. Lightning flashed. She saw her sister. For a split second, just an instant, standing near the altar. Then darkness. Marian froze. No sound. No footsteps. No echo of breath. Only the hush. "Caroline," she called, voice brittle. "Is that you?" A whisper answered from above. Not words. A tone. Low. Vibrating. Like a bell. But there was no bell in the tower. There never had been. She climbed the staircase. Step by step, her boots echoing against the stone spiral. The scent changed with each level, damp at first, then dry, then metallic, and then something impossible, ozone. As if lightning had struck the air itself, or something had been forged in the void. At the top, she found a small wooden platform, a ladder bolted to the rafters above, and a trapdoor hanging open like a mouth waiting to bite. She climbed again. The belfry was empty. No bell. Only rusted chains hanging in a circle, as if something had once been suspended there but had rotted through and dropped into the dark below. Wind howled through the slats. Marian stepped forward, and heard a second set of footsteps behind her. She spun. No one. Only shadows. Then, a whisper behind her ear. "You left me." She turned again. And this time, the shadows weren't empty. Her sister stood against the far beam. Barefoot. Pale. Her hair braided with thread and ash. A single chain wrapped around her wrist, snaking up into the ceiling. "Caroline." Marian breathed. The girl didn't move. She hadn't aged a day. Not since that night in 2002, when she had walked out of their house and disappeared into the woods behind Hollow End. "I looked everywhere," Marian said, stepping closer. "They said you ran away. They said you drowned. They said—" Caroline raised her hand and pointed at the center of the belfry, where the chains swayed, where nothing hung, or rather, where something was missing. "I rang the bell," Caroline whispered. Marian's breath hitched. What bell? The one that never existed. The one they forgot to forge. Lightning split the sky. For a second, the chains glowed red, as if the bell had been there once, cast in blood and vow and guilt, as if it still rang in some world parallel to this one. And when it had rung, it had taken her sister. "You're not real," Marian said. "You're a memory, a ghost. I'm what the bell made of me. Why are you here now?" Caroline turned, and for the first time, Marian saw her face. The eyes were not Caroline's. They were hers. A perfect mirror. "You called me." "I didn't." "You brought something with you." Marian opened her coat, hands trembling. The box. She'd found it 3 weeks ago in their childhood home. hidden behind a false panel in their father's study. A small iron bell, tarnished black, but humming faintly when she touched it. She hadn't rung it. Had she? Caroline's mouth opened. Her voice was both hers and something older. The bell never wanted to be silent. It only needed a voice to remember its name. And from the chains, a shape began to form. Rusted metal. Molten edges. A throat without a tongue. The bell. It was returning. Marian stepped back, heart pounding. What happens if it finishes? Caroline stared, then smiled. Then I can leave. And me. Lightning again. This time it didn't fade. A seam opened in the floor below them, spiraling down into a world of ash and smoke. And Marian saw, just for a moment, what had always waited beneath Hollow End. A mouth. Not a metaphorical one. A real one. And it was hungry. The mouth beneath Hollow End was not a metaphor. It was real. And Marian saw it, just for a blink, as the trapdoor beneath her feet thudded shut again, hiding the chasm that spiraled below the belfry. The chains swung violently, rattling as if something invisible thrashed against them. The bell, half-formed, hung for a moment in midair like a question nobody wanted to ask. And then it vanished. Gone. Caroline, too. No whisper. No farewell. Only silence, thick, pressed against the ears like water. Marian stood alone in the belfry, her pulse a thunder that belonged to someone else. She was cold, but her hands sweated. Her mouth tasted of rust and violets. The trapdoor below groaned. It was open again. A choice. Or a warning. She didn't remember climbing back down. She only remembered standing once more in the nave of the ruined church, the altar behind her scorched black, the pulpit cracked and leaning like a drunk. The bell had done something. She had seen something. Her sister. Her own reflection. And that impossible mouth. She fumbled in her coat pocket. The small bell was still there. Warm. Beating. It pulsed like a second heart. Back in town, Hollow End was wrong. Shutters were closed. Curtains drawn. The pub was empty. The air had a faint scent of rain, and something older. A staleness, like sealed catacombs. She knocked at the door of the one person she trusted, Mr. Kent, the churchwarden who had written to her last month about the condition of the steeple. He opened the door slowly. His eyes widened when he saw her. "You came," he whispered. "I saw her," Marian said. "Caroline." He didn't answer. "I went up the belfry. There's something up there. Something old. Something hungry." He looked around, then pulled her inside. Locked the door. Drew every curtain. Then poured them both a drink. "She called to you," he said after a long pause. "Didn't she?" Marian nodded. "She called to me too," he said. 40 years ago. I was a boy. I saw the bell ring, even though it's never been there. You hear it once, you never forget. It doesn't sound like anything human. More like stone remembering it used to be fire. He downed the drink in one gulp. "I didn't think it would wake again," he muttered. "Not after all this time." "She's alive," Marian whispered. "She hasn't aged. She's not alive. Not anymore." Marian's throat tightened. "She's what the bell made of her," he said. "And now that it's awake again, it'll want something in return." That night, Marian sat on the floor of her motel room, staring at the bell. It was impossibly old, though it bore no inscription. No maker's mark. The clapper inside was red, not painted, not rusted. Something else. When she touched it, she remembered. Not her own memories, Caroline's. The night she disappeared. The steps to the belfry. The voice that spoke to her from the air. "Ring the bell, and I will answer. Ring the bell, and I will give you your name." And Caroline, 16, too angry, too lost, had rung it. 3 times. Marian woke at 3:33 a.m. to a sound she thought had only lived in dreams. A bell. It rang through the walls of her room. But no one else stirred. She stepped outside. The village was asleep. But above the chapel, in the black window of the belfry, stood Caroline. Motionless. Watching. She returned to the church the next day. Not to search for her sister, but for herself. Something had changed in her since she saw that mouth. She couldn't explain it. But she was less afraid now. More drawn. As if she'd stepped into a story that needed her to finish it. The steps up to the belfry felt shorter. The trapdoor was already open. She climbed. No wind. No chains. No bell. Just dust. And a single note, folded into a triangle and resting on the floor where the bell had hovered the day before. She opened it. Only one line. You still don't remember what you promised. She sat down hard. Her hands trembled. Then she felt it, under her skin. A vibration. Faint, but there. From the bell in her coat pocket. She held it in her palm. And remembered something impossible. She was 8. Caroline was 15. They were in the church, before it was abandoned, before the roof blackened and the bells stopped. Caroline had found something hidden under the altar. A key. A journal. A riddle. She had made Marian swear an oath, binding their blood to a name they didn't understand. And Marian had agreed. She had forgotten. Until now. And with the memory came pain, like someone striking a bell inside her skull. She screamed. The belfry screamed with her. Every beam groaned. Every board warped. And in the air, the voice again. You rang it then. You will ring it now. She tried to stand. Couldn't. The floor was warping, softening beneath her like wax. From the corners of the room, shadows crawled. Formless. Twitching. Hungry. She fled. Down the stairs. Out the church. Through the graveyard. Not stopping until she reached the woods behind Hollow End. Where the bell couldn't follow. Where she hoped it couldn't. She collapsed against a fallen tree. And there, carved into the bark, half buried in moss. M+C, 1999. Forge nothing. She ran her fingers across the words. And remembered the rest of the vow. We are not the hammer. We are not the flame. We are the silence that keeps the bell from waking. But she had broken that vow. And now the bell remembered its name. Marian didn't dream that night. She remembered. The woods behind Hollow End were thick with rain, but her body didn't feel the cold. She lay against the moss-covered log, blinking up at the clouds shifting like ash above. Her breath fogged the air, slow, shallow, like something was breathing with her. Not inside her. Beside her. Caroline sat on the log opposite. Still barefoot. Still 16. But her eyes were older than time. I broke it, Marian whispered. Her sister nodded. The vow wasn't meant to last forever, Caroline said. Just long enough. For what? To keep it asleep. The bell. The one that had never been forged, never been cast in bronze or bound to a steeple. Because it didn't need to be. It was forged in words. In blood. In the kind of promise that doesn't echo until you forget it existed. They'd made the vow in secret. 2 sisters. Children pretending to be witches, trying to ward off the grief they couldn't name, not yet, for a father who'd already begun to slip. He had wandered into the chapel alone one night in 1998. Come back shaking. Muttering about the bell that rang in reverse. The bell that unmade what it once named. He died a week later. No one found a cause. Caroline had found the journal under the altar. A priest's, maybe. Or someone older. It warned of a bell not built, but buried. And 2 lines underlined in blood. To ring it is to rewrite the silence. To hear it is to lose your name. I heard it, Marian said. And now, I'm remembering things that didn't happen. Caroline smiled softly. No. You're remembering things that did. They just couldn't stay real while the vow held. Why did you ring it? I didn't mean to. She looked away, toward the chapel steeple rising above the trees. I was angry and sad, and I wanted to know who I was without you. Lightning flickered. The trees bent as though listening. I thought it would give me power, Caroline whispered. But the bell doesn't give. It asks. Marian felt the weight of something ancient pressing behind her ribs. Then what does it want from me? Caroline turned her gaze back. This time, her eyes were the bell's. It wants you to finish what we started. Marian woke just before dawn. Caroline was gone again. The woods looked normal. Birds chirped. The fog was thin. But the trees remembered. They leaned subtly away from the church. The path back to Hollow End was shorter than before. Or maybe she was longer. Her skin itched. Her fingertips stung. She pulled off her gloves and saw a line of tiny cracks across her palms. Not wounds. Seams. As if she were something hollow trying not to shatter. Back at Kent's, she found the old churchwarden half-drunk and fully terrified. He stared at her hands, then backed away. What did it give you? He asked. Nothing. Then what did it take? She didn't answer. He sighed and handed her a thin leather book, one she hadn't seen before. This belonged to my mother, he said. She was the last bell-keeper, before the last vow. Inside were pages of ritual. Names. Marks that weren't ink but scars pressed into parchment. And one page, circled in trembling pen. If the bell returns, it will ring through blood. A bone must be given. A name must be forgotten. The sister who remembers cannot stay. Marian closed the book. What does that mean? Kent's voice was dry as rust. It means you already know. That night, she returned to the chapel. The bell was waiting. No longer invisible. It hung, whole and dark, from the chains in the belfry, a shape that looked wrong from every angle, as if it had been sculpted from silence rather than sound. The clapper was bone. Human. It pulsed with the same beat as her chest. One step closer, and she saw the engraving. Not letters, not runes, a map. The map of a mouth. The one beneath Hollow End. I never meant to bring you back, Marian whispered. She felt Caroline behind her before she saw her. I know. I came to bury the past. To let you rest. Caroline shook her head. You didn't come to bury it. You came to test it. To see if the story was true. Marian lowered her voice. It was. Lightning lit the room. Caroline was no longer whole. Her outline flickered. Her skin peeled in patches, revealing not flesh, but shadow, a negative of herself. The bell was never meant to be real, Caroline said. It was the echo of what our family did. Our mother. Our grandmother. Their voices rang louder than the silence. And now, you'll have to decide. Marian stepped toward the bell. Marian stood before the chapel one last time. The dawn was pale, bruised with clouds. The belfry stood empty. No bell, no chain, no shadow. Only a gaping mouth of stone above the archway, and the memory of something that had never fully existed. The scar on her hand burned with each heartbeat. The wind was silent, and yet she heard it, faint, almost tender. One ring remains. She carried the journal Kent had given her. It felt heavier today, not just in weight, in purpose. Inside was a final page neither of them had noticed before, written not in ink, but ash. A bell is a name you cannot speak. A vow is a silence that wants to be heard. The grave was never meant for bones. It was meant for memory. At the bottom, in her own childhood handwriting, a message she hadn't remembered writing. If I forget, find me in the orchard below the graveyard. The place where no bell rings. The orchard. There hadn't been one. Not that she remembered. But memory was a bell too, and hers had been unrung. So she followed the path behind the chapel, past the ruins of the vestry, over the dry stone wall where ivy grew like veins. And there it was. Dead trees. Black bark. No fruit. No sound. The orchard below the graveyard. At its center stood a stone pedestal. On it, a single object wrapped in burlap. Her hands shook as she unwrapped it. Not a bell. A mirror. Old. Silver darkened to pewter. Cracked down the center. She stared into it, and for a moment saw not herself, but Caroline, whole, weeping. And then the glass shimmered, and showed Marian as she was now. And someone else. A child. A girl with her face and her eyes and Caroline's hands. A daughter. A memory of one. A possible. Then the voice spoke. Not from the mirror. From the scar. A vow unkept can become a door, but a vow kept becomes a key. She looked at the scar on her palm. It flared, not with pain, with truth. And suddenly, the orchard bloomed. Not with apples, but with bells. Hung from every branch, humming in the windless air. Thousands of them. Made from bone, from brass, from voices. Every one silent. Waiting. She turned slowly in the orchard. Each bell pulsed as she passed. Each one rang inside her chest without sound. And then, beneath the pedestal, she saw the final grave. It bore no name. Only the same phrase from the journal. Forge nothing. And beneath that, a carved circle, the shape of her scar. She knelt, pressed her hand into the mark, and felt the world tilt. The orchard darkened, but not with shadow, with memory, not hers. She saw women before her, the bell-keepers. Every one had made the same choice. To bury the bell, to become the silence. Caroline had tried to fight it. Marian had tried to forget it. But now, Marian understood. The bell didn't kill. It collected. Sound, grief, promise. Whatever was bound too tightly to let go. And it waited for a keeper. Not to ring it, but to hold it. Forever. The mirror split. Shattered into hundreds of slivers that floated in the orchard air. Each one showing a different version of her life. One where Caroline had never vanished. One where their father survived. One where Marian had never returned. One where she was a bell herself, hollow and ringing with names. But one fragment hovered close. It showed her, older, wiser. Teaching. Passing down something. Not fear. Understanding. She reached toward that shard. And it entered her. Without pain. Without resistance. She stood. And all the bells in the orchard bowed their clappers once. Not a sound. But a final, perfect pause. The kind that precedes sound. A hush so deep it echoed. And then, the orchard vanished. Marian found herself outside the chapel again. Morning birds sang. Sunlight warmed the stone. The belfry was empty. The graveyard calm. She walked to Kent's home. Knocked once. He opened, startled. "You're still here," he breathed. "So are you," she said, smiling faintly. She handed him the journal. He leafed through it, and paused. "This last page," he frowned. "It's blank." "No," Marian said. "It's full." She left Hollow End that day. No fanfare. No shadow. The scar on her palm faded over weeks. She never saw the mirror again. But every night before sleep, she'd hear it. A bell. Just once. Clear and soft. From within her. And she'd remember not what she had lost, but what she'd chosen to keep.